Amy Todd Fleming was a 25-year-old special ed school teacher who was living and working near Shabbona, Illinois, when she was found strangled to death in her own home in January of 1996. Now, while some of the townspeople have their own theories on who they think might have killed Amy, no one has ever been arrested in conjunction with her death. So who would have wanted to kill this well-liked school teacher? Let's talk about it. So today's unsolved murder was actually brought to my attention by my sister-in-law because she and my husband had grown up near Shabbona, Illinois, and this occurred while my husband was actually still going to high school there. So Shabbona, Illinois, if you're not familiar with where it is, it's in the northeastern part of Illinois. Shabbona, Waterman, Lee, these are all little small towns, population like 1,000 to 2,000 people. They're all within about 10 minutes of one another, and they're about 15 minutes from DeKalb, Illinois, which is about 30 minutes from Chicago. So when you hear that something is near Chicago, you might think like, oh, it's more of a suburb of Chicago, but it's definitely not. This is a very small town, rural area. Again, one of those towns where everybody knows everybody, and things like this just don't happen here. So that's what, really shocked the community when Amy was found strangled to death. So let's go back to that January day. So Amy was truly a hometown girl. She had grown up in Shabbona, Illinois, gone to school there. She went off to college and got her degree in DeKalb, Illinois from Northern Illinois University. Actually graduated there in December of 1993 with her bachelor's in special education. She came back home to teach, and a few months after she came back home, she married her husband, Derek Fleming, in July of 1994. So what makes this even sadder is that at the time of their death, they hadn't even been married for 2 full years yet. Derek was actually a childhood friend of Amy's, and apparently they raised cattle against one another in 4-H. So she had known Derek literally her entire life. Now, Derek was actually away at a cattle show out of state on the night that Amy died. So that's kind of clue number 1, because whoever did this would have had to have known that Amy was by herself. Now, Derek was a farmer, and they lived in a farmhouse near Lee, Illinois, which is a very rural community. And I'm actually going to put up some pictures of Amy's house. So it is a true farmhouse. There's no neighbors around. Nobody that would have heard a commotion or heard her scream. There's literally just farmland and fields. So Derek is away. On January 10th, the last time that somebody talked to Amy was on the phone about 8:30 p.m. It was a snowy night back in 1996, that January. The next day was a school day. And like I said, Amy was a special ed teacher. She taught at Indian Creek Middle School in Shabbona. So when she didn't show up for her classes, of course, the administrators of the school were alarmed right away because 1, Amy never missed school ever. And 2, if she was going to call in, she would have been conscientious enough to call in and request a substitute teacher. Because it had snowed that night, I actually think probably her friend, who was also the school secretary, her name was actually Claudia Hicks. She was just going to check on Amy to make sure that, obviously nothing had happened with her car. She knew that Amy's husband was out of town and just wanted to go ahead and check on her and make sure everything was okay. So her and another coworker from the school headed out to check on Amy. When they pulled up to Amy's farmhouse, nothing looked out of place. They went ahead and walked right in. The door was unlocked, which of course, it's not unusual for people that live in small towns or just even in houses out in the country to leave their doors unlocked. They're like, we're kind of isolated. Nobody's just going to come in. So I don't know that they really thought anything of the door being unlocked. But once they got further into the home, unfortunately, that's when they discovered Amy's dead body. She was on the floor and she was strangled. Now, there's not a lot of details about the crime scene itself. So this is what we do know. They found Amy, immediately called 911, paramedics came, and then the police got there. They didn't find anything that they knew of missing from the home except for a Quasar brand microwave and a Sharp VCR. And authorities pretty much from the beginning discounted that this was a robbery. They think that it was more staged to look like a robbery, because frankly, who's going to go in and strangle somebody for a microwave and a VCR? So they believed that Amy definitely knew her attacker. And of course, like I said, this person probably knew that she was alone and that her husband wasn't there for the night. I did also read, because Amy was very athletic. So she was actually coaching the girls' basketball team, volleyball team. She had played basketball in high school as well. So she was in good shape. Remember, she's only 25 years old. So of course, if somebody's attacking her, she's gonna fight like hell. And that's actually a direct quote. Somebody said that she fought like hell. So I'm imagining that she did have defensive wounds on her. And I'm imagining that she probably had the attacker's DNA underneath her fingernails just from scratching, what have you. I did read one report where authorities said they believed she was subdued before she was strangled. And I've never seen an explanation for what exactly they mean by subdued. Do they mean that she was drugged? Was she restrained? Was she tied up somehow? I've never seen an explanation for that. And also, too, what we don't know is how she was actually strangled. They've never really released if somebody strangled her with their bare hands, if they used an object, a rope, a phone cord, what have you. Now, of course, when, these murders happen, first and foremost, what do you look at? You look at the spouse, you start with the inner circle, and you kind of go out from there. By all accounts, Amy and Derek had a great relationship. Like I said, they'd only been married about a year and a half at the time of her death, if that. And he was out of state, I believe, in Iowa at a cattle show. So he had an airtight alibi, and authorities didn't believe he had anything to do with Amy's death. He was truly devastated by her death. And that's what was so puzzling to authorities, because here's a well-liked girl. Like I said, she grew up in the area. Her family was in the area. I mean, they were very well known in the community. Amy even waited tables at a local restaurant all through high school, all through college. So, I mean, townspeople knew who she was. She was very well liked by her students as well. In fact, they had to bring in grief counselors to talk to the students when she was found dead. So really, police at this point are puzzled because there's no motive. Why would anybody wanted to have done this to Amy? And even to this day, this happened in '96. They've never released a lot of theories about who did this. So I did a little sleuthing of my own and a little digging on the internet to see if, could I find anything? Was there a Reddit thread? Were there any message boards where they talked about Amy's death? Because I love to see different, people's opinion, especially locals that lived there or still live there, to see what their opinion was of the crime. So I actually found a great website. It's called websleuth.com, and I'm going to link it. But it is all about true crime. And there was a ton of comments. Somebody had posted about this story. So there was a lot of comments from people who said that they had either lived in Shabbona at the time that this occurred and they've moved away, but they always check on the story because it's, just so horrific. So these are a couple different theories that people have about who may have possibly harmed and killed Amy. So one was a theory that an ex-boyfriend had actually came and tracked her down. And that's really all that they said, is that they just heard it might have been an ex-boyfriend. I find that probably the least plausible theory because, one, she was from Shabbona. So I imagine if it was a high school boyfriend, everybody would have known who that was. And, granted, yes, she did go away to college for a little bit. But I don't know. I don't throw a lot of weight on that theory. Theory number two. Now, I had mentioned that Amy was the coach of the junior high school girls volleyball team. So apparently there was a father of one of the girls that she coached that was a little obsessed with Amy and kind of creeped her out. And a lot of people wondered if maybe he knew that Derek wasn't going to be at home that night. And, did he go over to the farmhouse, try to put the moves on Amy? He was rejected and things, escalated from there. So then he hastily tried to make it look like it was a robbery. Now, it is interesting to note Amy was not sexually assaulted. She was just strangled, which I think kind of puzzled authorities even more because I think had she been sexually assaulted, then they probably would have, thought, okay, this is somebody that was obsessed with her. But the fact that that didn't occur, I think actually threw a monkey wrench more in their thinking. And then there is a third theory that I've read about that, I don't know, seems plausible to me, but again, I only know a little piece of this puzzle. Somebody commented that there was a farmhand that actually worked on her husband's farm, and he was heavily suspected by the townspeople. Now, apparently he was questioned, and he refused to give any DNA. He refused to take a lie detector test, and shortly after this happened, he moved away. Now, I know refusing to give DNA or take a lie detector test obviously doesn't make you guilty by any means, but I would think if you're innocent and you want to be cleared, you'd go, yeah, absolutely, I'll, swab my mouth, give you some DNA, which kind of, lends weight for me to the theory that Amy must have had her killer's DNA on her. Like I said, if she was fighting, did she scratch his skin? So I feel like they have the DNA of whoever did this, and you have to have, if you're going to go after a suspect and get their DNA, if they won't voluntarily do it, you have to have enough evidence to be able to present to get a warrant to get their DNA, and obviously they didn't have that. So that's the third theory. So we've got an ex-boyfriend, we've got obsessive parent, and then we've got a farmhand. Now, again, though, what would have been the farmhand's motive for doing that? Was he going over there to try to sexually assault her and she fought him off, and then one thing led to another? I don't know, and nobody really knows. So that's what makes it just so frustrating. Now, I did read Lee County Sergeant Shane Miller said they still consider this an active case. Although it happened in 1996, they always, if they get a new lead about it, they're still on this case. And actually within, I think, 2 years of her death, they had actually already done over 500 interviews with leads, persons of interest, what have you. The FBI was even brought in to assist and try to come up with a composite of what type of person they think would have done this. And that's why the FBI, in their opinion, they felt like it was somebody Amy knew. They did not think this was just a random, that she was targeted. Now, her house is right off of a highway, and like I said, it is very isolated. There's nothing there. In fact, if you go to Google Maps and you do the little 360, when you turn it around, it's literally just a field. I mean, there's nothing there. But like I said, FBI don't believe that this was random. I did also see where authorities felt like the crime scene might have been contaminated a little bit, because like I said, by the time they got there, you have 2 coworkers that have come into the house, traipsed through the house, I'm sure touched some things. You had the paramedics come traipse through the house. So by the time the cops actually got there and were able to seal everything off, there may have been some critical evidence that was lost. It did also snow the night of her murder. So if there had been any, possible car tracks in the snow or footprints, those were obviously lost with everybody else's cars coming and going from the house. So, that's too bad that might have gotten, unfortunately contaminated. But, I do think that the media has done a really good job in that area of still keeping this alive. In fact, the most recent articles I read about this were in 2016, because it was the 20th anniversary of the death of Amy. And they did say, again, we're still taking new tips. We would love to get this solved one day. So, they definitely have done a good job of keeping this in the media. And that's one reason that I wanted to focus on this case as well. There is a $25,000 reward for a tip that leads to the arrest and conviction of Amy's murderer. And that was raised by the town people of Waterman and Shabbona. So those 2 little towns raised $25,000. Of course, I will put up at the end of this video a number that you can call if you have any tips, if you can think of anybody that acted suspiciously after her death. The other thing that somebody mentioned on the Web Sleuths message board is, this might be a long shot, but, whoever did this took a Quasar brand microwave and a Sharp VCR. So they had to have done something with that. So people in the area, think back to somebody all of a sudden have this brand microwave and VCR. Did you see this? Maybe they dumped it somewhere. That's quite possible as well. But, any little clue that you can give definitely helps. So again, I will put up the number to call if you do have any tips that can help investigators. But I really want to see Amy's killer brought to justice. I know that her friends and family that still live in the area, they are very much keeping this case alive, and they would like to see her killer, arrested and brought to justice as well. Guys, thanks for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe if you want to receive notifications every week when we upload a new video, and make sure that you check out my Instagram as well, which is Murder in the Midwest. See you next time.